So 2 weeks ago, we did the kind of intro, internet basics, HTML, adding content. Last week, we made our content look a lot better with CSS, just the basics. And then today, we're doing this advanced styling type workshop. Made it a little bit flexible, so we have a huge list of things that we could cover today. The top three are things that I was going to cover last week, but we just kind of ran out of time. So we're going to kind of close out our box model conversation. That's the determining how much space on a web page an element actually takes up, the height, the width, padding, margin, all of that. With list styles, we're just going to basically remove the bullet points from a list. With HTML, when we were creating our list, it had those kind of bullet points or numbers by default. And I'm just going to show you one property of how you can actually change what's there. And then we'll learn one last selector, which gets super helpful, which is called the descendant selector. And then we have all of these really, I think, cool things. The first thing is variables. This allows you to save a value in one location and then use that same value across your whole website. And then that way, if you ever need to update it, you don't have to go to every part where that is saved. You just go to the one place where you declared it and update it there. So like an example of that is you would just say, the blue that I want is this blue, and then all you have to do is update that color code once, and anytime that you've used that blue keyword elsewhere will be automatically updated. Then we have three things that all touch on this responsive web design topic, which is how do you make your website look good on a laptop, look good on a phone, look good on a tablet, make it adaptable to different screen sizes. And then we have filters, which is basically like image slash color effects type things. This is how we can add drop shadows. We can make something grayscale. We can add a blur, stuff like that. And then if we have time, we'll add a little bit of motion and interactivity to our web design with some transitions, which you set your kind of before and after styles, and then you kind of set how long you want this kind of automatic transition between the two of them to be. So yeah, some pretty fun stuff that we should be doing today. Same text editor as always. And then our new starting files are at this link. If you ever have Visual Studio Code in like your dock on your Mac, you can always do this. So if you were to go to like in Finder where that is, so for me that's right here, you can always just like click and drag and drop it on it, and it just will automatically open too. If not, you can do File, Open Folder, and then navigate to where that folder was downloaded and then you click open. So we got our index.html file. That's just all of our HTML. We do have some basic CSS in here. So changing the fonts, some text alignment, some margins, and stuff like that. And then we got some assets in here. That's just some logos and some images. So pretty simple website. And I'm going to click on the Go Live button in the bottom right to make that website appear. And this is just what it looks like. Pretty similar to what we were working with before. And just so that we can see things more clearly, I'm going to go like this, just to have this on one side and then the code on the other. And then if you remember from last week where I had us kind of split the screen so that we had HTML on the left and CSS on the right. I'm going to do the same, but put my CSS on the bottom. You can do it to the right if you want. So I'm going to right click on the tab for style.css and then split and move. I'm going to split down. So what that does is it's basically the same as that split right where it does the different tabs, but this way mine are on top and bottom, like so. So we're gonna get started with kind of finalizing that box model stuff with the height and the width and all of that. And the starting files are on the whiteboard. So I'm gonna go in my styles.css file, and I have a bunch of comments that kind of separate these out into sections. You don't have to follow these along. You can place them anywhere that you want. I typically like to group my styles together just so I know where to look. And so I'm going to go to the page styles kind of section I've created, which should be around line 7. And basically, the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to customize the margins on the whole page here. Because right now it's just the default Chrome, like 8 pixels on this side. And I want there to kind of be more of like a margin to kind of crush it in a little bit. So I'm going to go down to my line 9. And to target this kind of like background page, I'm going to type body. And that is our body element that we added up here, which is like all of our main content. And then space, my open and closing curly brackets. I'm going to hit enter. And to change the margin, we did the margin property before, and we'll stick with that. But the first thing that I want to show today is like a little bit of a trick. So before, we kind of explored that you can do each individual one. So margin top, margin bottom, margin left and right. And then if you use just the keyword margin, it's doing all four at the same time. You can also use this same one to customize those individual ones independently as well. So if I were to provide 4 different values here, so if I were to do, let's say like 0 pixels, 10 pixels, 20 pixels, and 30 pixels, and I save, this is going to be 0 pixels on the top, 10 pixels on the right, 20 pixels on the bottom, and 30 pixels on the left. So that way you don't have to write margin top 0, margin right 10, so on and so forth. You can just all do it in one line of code. Now you can also condense this from 4 down to 2 values. So I'm going to do 0 pixels and then 50 pixels like this. And what this does is this first value will set the margin for the top and the bottom at the same time. And then the second value is going to set the margin for our left and our right at the same time. So when I save that, I get this nice kind of no margin up here, and then all of our content has this kind of 50 pixel on the left and 50 pixel on the right margin. The images, because we do have them set to a fixed, because we haven't like changed their actual size, their height and their width, dependent on anything, they are just going to overflow. But we'll fix that. Now we're going to go down to our button styles because right now our buttons are, I put a little bit of styling here, but I want to make them look a little bit better. Want to give them a little bit more kind of space in between our text and the sides because it's a little cramped in there. And then I also want to change the corners because right now they're very sharp. They go to like a point, and I want to change it so that they're a little bit more curved. They look a little bit more modern. And so I'm going to go down to my button styles in my CSS. And in this rule, we can just add some stuff here. So I'm going to go to the end of my line, what's 51 for me, the font size, and hit enter. And I'm going to do the spacing first. So padding is going to be our the distance between the actual element and its border, whether or not that border is visible or not. So in this case, it's going to be the space in between this text and where the gray stops right here. So just like we did with the margin up here, where we provided 2 values to do 0 on the top and the bottom and 50 on the left and the right at the same time, you can do the same with the padding. So I'm going to do padding colon, and I'll do 10 pixels. So this will add 10 pixels of space on the top and the bottom. And I'm going to do a space and then do 15 pixels. And this will add 15 pixels to the left and the right. And when I save, I now get more space in between the text and the button. It looks a little bit better. It looks a little less cramped. All right. Now to tackle the corners. So right now, again, they're still pretty sharp. So I'm going to add a new line in my button tag. And the property to change how curved your border is border hyphen radius, just like that. And in here, you can provide pixel values, you can provide percentages, any of those units. So I'm just going to do 20 pixels. So 20 and then my semicolon. And now when I save, it gets rounded and it looks a little bit more like that modern kind of pill shape button. And that's with this border radius right here. Now, the last thing that I want us to do to kind of close out this kind of box model, some sizing, is we're going to change some stuff about this subtitle right here. So if you go to our hero section in our CSS, a hero section in a website is basically whenever you go to one and it's like, if I were to, let's say, go to like the USC website, it's like this section right here. It's at the very top. It's usually there's like a either like a background image or some big image, and there's the title, there's some subtitles and stuff like that. This is called the hero section. And so I'm going to target my subtitle. And if we go to my HTML that I provided and I go under the header and into main, I can see that I have an ID of subtitle here. We have ID equals subtitle. How do we select that down here in CSS? It's the pound symbol. So the pound symbol says look for something that has ID equals, and then you put in the text of what it's equal to. So in this case, we're going to do subtitle, and that's going to select only this paragraph now. And it's not going to select the other times that I have paragraphs. So here, I'm going to increase the font size, make it a little bit bigger. So font hyphen size. And so far we've been mostly doing pixel values. If you use like Microsoft Word or some of the other design software, like maybe InDesign, you might also see the points. So 24 PT. That's another kind of unit. It's pretty typical for font. And then I want to make the distance between my subtitle and my actual page title a little bit shorter. So to do that, I can do my margin hyphen top. So this way we've been kind of doing margins kind of all over or on the top and the bottom at the same time or the left and the right at the same time. But now I'm just going to do my top right here. So margin hyphen top, and I'm going to put 0 pixels, which will make it closer to my title. And then I want to increase the distance between this and the next part. I really want to kind of make it stick out. So in this case, I'm going to do margin hyphen bottom and then 75 pixels to just make it a pretty good white space. And when I save this, I now get my text bigger. It's at the 24-point font. It is a little bit closer to here. We'll have to probably, I think, change the stuff in our heading one. And then there's a little bit more distance between that and the next kind of parts. The next thing that we're going to tackle is we are going to edit these kind of list items. So typically when you're adding like a navigation menu, you're going to have, we have our nav element saying that this is our navigation menu, and then it's in an unordered list. And by default, that's going to give us these bullet points. But typically when you have your menu like up over here, you don't want to have the bullet points showing. And so to change that, we can target the unordered list here. And so what we're going to do is go down to our, let's do header and footer styles right here. And we're going to change this, but the thing that's a little bit difficult, right, is right now we don't have an ID on it. We don't have a class on it. The only way that we can target it is using this UL element, the list element. But maybe there's somewhere later on in our code where we want to have like a normal bulleted list somewhere. So our two options here, we can add an ID or a class to here, but I want to show you the descendant selector right now. So what this allows you to do is it allows you to specify, look for one element. So in this case, we're going to type in nav. So this is just look for our nav elements. So that's going to be here and then down here in our footer. It'll also be down here. And then to say, I want you to go inside of this content, you do the kind of closing caret that we used in HTML. And then we say what to look for. So in this case, it's going to be UL. So what this selector does is it says, look for every navigation element. So every nav element in our HTML, go inside of it. So in this case, somewhere in between the starting and the closing, and look for an unordered list, which it'll find right here. And so I'm going to do space and then my brackets. And then now to change what is listed right here, we can use list style type. And when we set this to none, that's going to remove our bullet points right here. Okay. So list style type none on our unordered list will give us a list, but it doesn't have those bullet points anymore. And in a little bit, we're going to learn how to place them like over here, like an actual menu. What's nice about doing it this way is if I were to go to, let's say, right underneath my title right here, and I quickly add just an unordered list with some items, and I'll just copy and paste. You don't have to follow along on this. I still get my normal bulleted list because this unordered list is not within a navigation element like this one is. And so this basically allows you to be a little bit more specific with what you're choosing. So now we're going to get to the actual advanced styling stuff for today. So I'll go through these a little bit slow because some of these can be a little bit tricky. So the first thing that we're going to do is to learn about variables in CSS. So essentially what a variable is it is a form of a container that allows you to store some piece of data that you want to use later on. In this case, we're going to do it where we're going to declare a bunch of colors in one location at the top of our CSS. And then we can use those colors throughout our document. And then if we ever need to change the color, let's say someone that we're working with says they really hate that green, here's a different green to use. That way we don't have to go through everything and look for if that color green is over there. We can just update it in the one location. So go to the very top underneath global styles, and I'm gonna place a couple of enters or returns just to give us some more space. And you declare your variables at a place called the root. And every HTML document has this somewhat invisible to us structure where it has a document, and inside of that document, it has the head section, and inside of the body section, there's your actual content. And so when you want to declare something that's going to be used by everything with a variable, you do colon and then the word root. And then this allows you to define things at the very top level of this document, and then everything can access it later on. So I'm going to do a space and then my brackets. And in between these brackets is where you can place what you want your variables to be. So the first variable that I want to create is one to store the color that I want to use for all of my text. So how you create this actual variable is you do two hyphens, so hyphen, hyphen. Then similar to those IDs in the classes that we went through, you provide some sort of a name for it. So in this case, I'm going to do text, but you can name it whatever you want. And then you can do colon, space, and then now you provide what you want the value to be. So I've already picked out some colors that you can follow along with. If you want to use your own colors, you can go to something like realtimecolors.com, find different colors, and then take the hex code for that if you want to use your own colors. So for text, I'm just going to provide the color code. So it's going to be the pound symbol and then 071 E1C with a semicolon. And this is just a specific color. And if you hover over this little thing, it's kind of like a darker teal black type color. Now I'm going to create some other color variables. So I'm going to do an enter. And then I will do a hyphen hyphen, and I'm going to provide a name for this new variable. So in this case, I'm going to say background, and then I'll do my colon. And this one, I found the color F4 FD FC semicolon. And this is like just like an off-white type color. And then the last one that I want to use is I am going to do a specific color for these buttons. So I'm going to do hyphen hyphen. I'm going to name it button. And then I'm going to provide the color of E58 CC9. And then my semicolon. And this is a like a pinkish color. So this is where we've declared our variable values. And if we hit save, you'll notice that nothing actually happens. So this is just basically defining what we want this to be, but now we actually have to put it into use. So I'm going to go down here to my asterisk selector, which is our universal. This is going to select everything on the page. And I am going to enter a new line, and I'm going to do color. So this is going to go for our font color. And instead of providing the actual hex code like we were doing before, we put VAR, which stands for variable. And then inside of these parentheses, we do the hyphen hyphen and then the name of the variable. So in this case, we're going to do the text one. And if we do our semicolon at the end of this line and we save, all of our text has been updated to use this color right here. Because it's pretty close to black, you might not be able to see it. But now let me show you that if I were to go up here to our variable declaration, and let's say I change this color to like a blue, and now I save, all of our text will get updated here. And so what's super helpful with these variables is you just define what it is once, and then you can use this color and then use the variable value as many different places as you want to. And then now you just update it in one location. It has to be at the beginning because when the browser is reading through, it always reads top to bottom. And so if you try to use this variable text before it's actually defined up here, there might be an error. So you always want to do, if you're going to do any of these variables, you define them at the very top so that you can use them no matter where. We got two more places that I want us to use these colors. So if you go down to page styles in our CSS, in our body rule, where we already have our margin right here, I'm going to enter a new line and I'm going to put our background color. And for this one, I'm going to use the variable background that we declared. So VAR, and then inside our parentheses, we do hyphen hyphen, and then the name. And VS Code automatically knows that we've defined some variables. So we can set that like so. And then go all the way down to where our buttons are, which is at the very bottom. And inside here, we're going to add a background color using that pink color that we used, which we said is the name button. And then we're also going to target the color. So right now, with that asterisk, that universal, it selected everything and did that kind of like dark teal black color. But I'm going to change the color specifically for our button text. And because the button element selector is more specific than the universal one, this one will override what we set before. So I'm going to set this one equal to our background color. And when we save this, our buttons now have this kind of nice pink background. And then the text color is the same as the background, so it looks almost like a cutout here. And we're going to start exploring what is called responsive web design, which is where we make our design adaptable to different screen sizes. And there's a couple different ways that you can do this. And if I go back to my slide about it, it's going to be these three. So we have Flexbox, Grid, and Media Queries. So we're going to start off with Flexbox. And what Flexbox is it allows you to create a container that has multiple elements in it, and then it's easy to place them side by side. Flexbox is really great for creating what are called one-dimensional layouts. So this is aligning things left to right or top to bottom. In order to create this Flexbox, we have to create what is called a flex container. So this is the element that contains all of our other elements that we're wanting to place side by side. So in this case, we want this to be for our navigation up here. So we're going to first start off by exploring how do we create these list elements that they're side by side, right? Because right now they're top to bottom, but we want them to be left to right, almost like a menu that you would see on an actual website. So if I go in my HTML code and let me just go find it, I can see that those are all contained within this navigation unordered list that we have already. So we already played around with that with our list style type. We did none. So we can use this same code block to create this little section as a Flexbox container. So I'm going to enter a new line in my nav UL code block under my header and footer styles. And in order to make these display side by side using Flexbox, we're going to use the display property, and then we're going to set it to flex. And when you set display flex, it automatically creates it as this, what is called a Flexbox container. So it's going to place them side by side, even though in the HTML code, they're listed like top to bottom. And that's how a list is always shown like this. So display flex already gets us a little bit of the way there. Now, by default, we will get left to right. However, if you want to change the direction, like let's say you wanted to create that top to bottom flex box, you would set the flex direction property. So when you set flex direction, you have a couple of different options here. So by default, it's going to be the row that shows up, and that's left to right. You can also do row reverse, which is a little funky. This one will take your elements and flip them around. So when you set flex direction to row reverse, even though in the HTML code it's about and then projects and then contact, on our actual display, it's going to be the reverse, where it says contact, projects, and then about. You can also set it to column if you want the elements to be aligned top to bottom, like kind of like they were when they were already a list. Or you can do column reverse if you want to do them like that, but flip them for whatever reason. Because we like the default, which is row, we can just not use the flex direction property. The next property that you can set is going to be a little hard to see with us right now because we don't have a ton of elements, but this is going to be the flex wrap property. What this allows you to do is determine what happens when you have so many elements that they would go beyond the screen. Like they just keep going. And this basically says, do you want these elements to wrap or not? So some options that we have are no wrap, which this basically means just keep them going and going and going and going. There's wrap, which in this case would be we have left to right, and then once it reaches its very end, it'll start adding the rest of the elements down here in a new line, like so. And wrap reverse is basically the same thing, but instead of adding it over here on the left part, it'll add it over here on the right. So it'll kind of go like here, and then it'll add the next element here, and keep going like that. We don't have to deal with flex wrap on this. We only have 3 kind of menu items, so we can just get rid of this. So whenever we create a flex container, there's going to be 2 axes that are created that we can't see, right? So there is the main axis, and this is going to follow the one that you have set. So in this case, we have our flex direction set to row. So that is our kind of left to right here. And then we have the secondary axis, which is going to set it from top to bottom. So we want to have our elements be centered on this top to bottom axis. And so if we want to align them that way, we use align items. And when we hit center, it doesn't look like it did much right now. But what's going to happen is that when we place these over here, it's going to be aligned centered with our test logo that we have up here in the top left. So this is aligning them in the center like so. And the last one I want to show you with specifically this part before we start placing it up here with this other logo is the gap. So right now there's no space in between all of these. Doesn't look great. If we want to add a little bit of white space, we just use the property gap and we're going to set it to 20 pixels. And that will add 20 pixels of white space in between our menu items so they look like this. Now we want to do the work of putting our menu in the top right and have it be aligned with our logo and kind of finish out our navigation menu right here. Because when I expand this, you'll notice it's still just down here. So we can use Flexbox to do that again. So if I go to my HTML file and I look at where is this image and where is my navigation menu, they are both within my header section, and they are both also within my footer. And so I can target both of those at the same time and set them as a flexbox. To do that, I'm going to go in my header and footer styles, and I'm going to type header to target my header, comma, space, and put in the word footer to also target the footer at the same time. I want to work on both this and this at the same time. I'm going to hit space, and then in my brackets, I'm going to set it to be another flexbox. So to do that, we just use this display flex property again, display flex. And if I save, we're getting there a little bit. It's up here. Now it creates this flexbox with that row as a default. So it's going to place this on the left and our list on the right. Now, right now, they are aligned at the top right here. So in order to make them centered, we can do our align items center. And then now our image, logo, and our menu are perfectly centered on this axis right here. And the last thing we need to do is how do we push it from this stuff all the way over here? Right? We want it to be on the right side. Well, so when we're looking at right here, we need to use our main axis, which instead of using a line, which will go top to bottom, making sure that there's equal distance on top and bottom, we have to use the word justify. And so this is going to target this line right here, this axis. And instead of items, for some reason, it's justify content. I don't know why it's not items, but it's justify content if you're going to go on the main axis and align items if you're going on the secondary. Now, because we only have two elements in here, right? We're just looking at the link and the navigation. What we can use is if we set this equal to space hyphen between, this will push our image logo to the far left of this box, and it'll push our navigation, which is the only other direct element underneath our header and our footer, all the way to the right. And so when we save that, we get this nice distance between them. And then now whenever we resize our screen, our menu is still going to be in that top right, and that image will still be in the top left. So we're starting to make it a little responsive. It's going to look good on a phone. It's going to look good on our desktop and all of that through using Flexbox. To close out this navigation menu, the logo is a little big. I want to make it a little bit smaller. And so I'm going to show you a pretty nifty trick. So in our HTML, I have the class logo image set for both our header image and our footer image. So I'm going to target the class, which is named logo image. And I can set our height and our width to be whatever I want, but sometimes it's a little difficult to make sure that it's keeping the same proportions, right? The same aspect ratio. So it still looks good. It's not shrunk in a weird way. It's not stretched in a weird way. So what I can do is in my brackets, I'm gonna set the width that I want it to be. So in this case, I want it to be 150 pixels. Now, if I want for to specify the height as well, if I want it to be dynamic based on whatever I put the width to, I can set my height to fit content. What this does is it'll change this image right here to be only 150 pixels wide, however big that is. And then it'll change our height to have the same aspect ratio as it does right now. So it'll still look good right here. And even if I were to increase my width, let's say to 300, it's still going to increase the height just based on the ratio that it currently has. If I even go down to 10, it's really small, but it's going to make it so that you don't have to kind of manually change two different numbers. You just have to change the one. So this is what we got so far with our navigation menu. It's looking pretty good. And the way that we set it up, it also did it on the bottom here. And the last way that we're going to use our Flexbox is to move all of our contact buttons that are at the bottom here to be centered, like so. So to do that, you want to look at what is the container for our buttons. And I've already set it up for us in our HTML. You'll notice that we have the div, which is our grouping element. And I have the ID of contact buttons right here. So back in our CSS, I'm going to go down to my contact buttons section. I am going to target my contact buttons div using the pound symbol and then contact hyphen buttons. And just like we've been doing, I'm going to set the display to flex. I want them to be centered on this, which is our primary axis. It's the row. So our primary is left to right. So I want them to be centered that way. So I have to use justify content. I want there to be a little bit of a gap between them. If you remember from the menu items that we did when we specified make it a flex box, it crunched them all together. So I want there to be a little bit of a gap. So I'm gonna do 25 pixels there to create some space. And then I also want there to be some space between my buttons and this navigation menu at the bottom. It's a little cramped right now. So I'm gonna do margin bottom set to 50 pixels. And when I save, I now get my contact buttons nicely centered, has the space in between them, which is our gap, and then there's some distance between them and the navigation menu down here. And what's really great about this Flexbox stuff is that it's adaptable to the screen size, so it'll always be centered no matter what screen you're using. So we will move on to the next responsive web design technique, where Flexbox is really powerful in these one-dimensional ones, so left to right or top to bottom. You can use it for things that are both of those at the same time, but it's not the best suited for it. For example, we want to have these project sections like this to kind of look like little cards side by side and kind of almost like a bento box type layout. And Flexbox, you can do that. It would just take a long time and a lot of tweaking around with things. So we're going to use a different technique, and this one is called grid. And the grid allows you to set your columns and your rows and then place your elements inside of those kind of sections. So I'm going to go to my projects section. When I put my contact button stuff in here, so I'm just going to move that so that it's underneath this heading. So in my project section, I want to set all of the stuff within projects, except for this heading, to be a grid. And the way that I've set this up in our HTML is we have one div with the ID of project section, which is going to be everything from here after the heading through down here. And then each of these projects has their own div to group them together. So this one is our project one, which is this image, name, description, and button. Down here we have project two, which is the next one, And so we want to set it for all of them at the same time. So we're going to have to target this one right here. So to target something with an ID of project section, you just do the pound symbol and then projects hyphen section. And just like we set display to flex to create a Flexbox container, we can do display grid to set this up as a grid. And when I do that, nothing happens yet. So this just basically sets up the kind of infrastructure for your grid to actually happen, but we need to define how many columns we want there to be and how many rows we want there to be. So for our columns, we can use grid hyphen template hyphen columns. And then the value here is you want to define how many columns you want to do. To do that, you can provide as many values as you want. So let's say you just want one column that is like 50 pixels. You would just provide 50 pixels like so. And it's going to give us a really funky behavior because trying to cram all of the stuff besides the images like so. If I wanted a second column that is also 50 pixels, I would just provide 50 pixels again. And if I wanted, let's say, a third column that's twice as big, so like 100 pixels, I can provide that like so. You will notice that we get this really funky behavior because we actually haven't told the CSS where we want to place all of these elements yet. But we can start to see these columns form. This one is 50 pixels, this next one is 50 pixels, and then this one's 100 pixels. So more of this can fit like so. Now, this isn't super responsive, right? Because no matter what screen size it is, it'll always be exactly 50 pixels, 50 pixels, and 100 pixels. So we can replace these with different units. So there is a unit in CSS that is an FR. So if I just get rid of this and say 1FR, this is what is called a fractional unit. And it is some kind of abstract type of thing that says this is equal to 1. And it's just going to give us kind of back to what we had. If we want to set a second column that is the same size as this one, we just do 1FR again. If we want to set a column that is double the amount of this abstract unit, we do 2FR, and so on and so forth. The nice thing about this is that these are responsive because this isn't going to look at a specific pixel value and constrain you to that. Instead, it's looking at the whole distance of your screen and breaking it up into these chunks. So in total, this would be 4. So like 25% is each. So 1FR would be 25%, this one would be 25%, and this one would take up half. And we can't really see it as well because it just bleeds over, but that's kind of the idea. Now, if you're going to add multiple columns, it can get a little tricky if you keep on adding value after value after value. And so that's why there's this repeat function. So I'm going to get rid of these, and I am going to type in the word repeat. And then inside of parentheses, the first value that I want to provide is how many columns I want there to be. So I'm going to put 12 here because I want 12 columns. 12 columns allows you to create several different designs that are symmetrical. So if I were to open something to show you this, I'll just open up this. So if I wanted to show this grid, and let me just add some stuff here. If I had something that was 12 columns, I can create one element that spans that 12. If I wanted there to be two things that are side by side, I could do something like this, and they're still symmetrical, right? To the left and the right. So this one is spanning maybe like 6 columns. This one is also spanning 6 columns for 2 elements. 2 times 6 is 12. I can also have 3 elements that span about like 4 columns each. And the sizing is a little funky on this because I'm manually doing this. But I could have 3 elements that span 4 columns each and it's symmetrical. I can go further. I could have 4 that span 3 columns each and it makes it symmetrical. It's just a little bit of division to make sure that there's multiple different ways that you can make something look symmetrical on each side. So after you've provided how many columns you want, you have to provide what are the size of them. So I'm going to do a comma after the 12. And then for the size, I'm going to put 1 FR. And this line of code basically says create 12 columns that are all equally sized. And it's going to create them. There's a little bit of overflow because it's just going to create 12 and put every element in them. So it's just all equally sized like so. Now we also want to do our rows. And it's very similar. So we can do grid template rows, and this will create how many rows that we want in our grid. And I can do the same thing. So in this case, I'm just going to do 2 rows because basically I have 6 different things that I'm showing, and I want 3 to be side by side in the first row, and then 3 to be side by side in the second row. So I can do 2, 1 FR, and this will create 2 equally sized rows, which does the same thing. And you'll notice that it does have this big section right here. And that's because by default, before we start deciding where each element goes, it'll try to place it in the next available cell of the grid. It can be a little hard to visualize. And so if you're in Chrome and you right click and then do inspect, this Chrome DevTools actually does kind of help show where this grid is. So I can see that I have my first column, my second column, my third column, and I can keep going all the way and I'd see the rest of them. And then I can see my first row and my second row right here. Now, by default, similar to everything else, as you'll notice through this kind of visualization, these are all just like flushed up right next to each other. There's no space. So, like we did with our Flexbox, we can set a gap. And when you set a gap, that basically just creates a little bit of white space in between your columns and your rows to make them look a little bit better. So now we have to go through and actually tell the browser where we want each of these to be. So I want as I mentioned before, I want these to be 3 side by side. And so if I want 3 side by side on a 12 column grid, each of these are going to have to take up 4 columns. And so what I can do is I'll find my first project. So in my HTML, I have this set to div with an ID of project one card. So after my projects section, I'll do an ID of project one card. And so now we can specify where do we want this actual project kind of section to be in our grid. So to specify the columns, we can do grid hyphen column hyphen start. And this is going to be what is our starting column. And they are numbered. So if I were to reopen up my Chrome DevTools, I can see these like numbers that show up. So this first column starts at 1. And so I'll want to put that as my value here. So grid column start is going to be 1. Then I also need to specify where it's going to end. So grid column end. This one can get a little tricky. So here, if I were to just try to see a little bit more of this, the grid column start actually makes a little bit of sense because it's just the left side of this. So we set it to 1, that means start at this column, but we want it to span 4 columns. So we want it to go from here all the way to here because we do have a bunch more over here for the rest of them. So even though I want 4 columns, I need to say my grid column end is 5 because I need it to go from 1 to 2, which is 1 column, 2 to 3, which is a second column, 3 to 4, a third column, and then 4 to 5, which is our fourth column, to spread all the way across here. And so I can do grid column end and set it equal to 5. And when I do that, it's a little funky because we haven't set everything else up yet, but now it does kind of clip to just the amount of columns that I want this project to take up. Now we can do the same thing for our rows. So I'm going to do grid row start. And we're going to start at 1 because that's the beginning of our grid that's up here. And then to span just the one row, we can do grid row end, and we just do one more, so that'll be 2. And then now, if I go over and I can inspect in my Chrome DevTools, I can see it does try to squish them all in because we haven't placed these yet. But my content for my project 1 only takes up columns 1 through 4, and then row 1 to 2. Similar to the box model stuff that we're doing before, where we specified kind of all of the sides of something at the same time, there are some shorthands for this. So if I wanted to just, instead of doing grid column start 1, grid column end 5, I can specify those with just one property. So I can just do grid column, singular. You provide the start value. So in this case, it would be 1. You do a space, and then a forward slash, and then a space, and then you do the end. So in this case, it would be 5. And this one line of code is the same as these two. And so I can get rid of that. And I can do the same with my grid row. So 1, 2. This one line replaces these 2 lines. And when you do that, and if I were to save, nothing happens because it's the same code, just written a bit shorter. And you can actually take this even further. So you can specify these in just one line. So you can do grid area, and you provide 4 values to this property. The first value is going to be your row start. So that's going to be our 1 right here. So row start. The second value is going to be your column start. So that'll be 1 here. The third value will be your row end, which is our 2. And then the last value is our column end. So in this case, 5. I can get rid of my grid column and my grid row. And when I save, again, nothing's changed, but we were able to condense that 4 lines of code into just 1. Okay, let's place the rest of these so that they look better. It doesn't just look like this. I promise it looks cool at the end. So we'll move on to the next project card. So that will be our project 2 card, and we can target that with our ID selector. And I'm going to use my grid area shorthand again. So project 2 card with grid area. Now we start with our row start. So that's going to be this is still going to be in our first row. We're basically going to have 3 of these in the top row and 3 of these in the bottom row. So our row start is going to be 1 still. Then we have to do our column start. And we want this one to start after this last project section ended. So it ended at 5. So we place 5 in our column start. Our row end is the same as before, so 2. And our column end, if you remember, you have to go 1 past where you want it to go. So that first one was 1 to 4, so we had to pick 5. The second one, we want to do 5 through 8, so we have to put 9. And then let's do the last one in this top row. So this will be our project 3 card. We do our grid area property again. Our row start is still the same. It's still up here in the top row. So that's going to be 1. The second one is going to be our column start. So that is where our last one ended. So that's 9. Our row end is still the same. Still 2. This is still just in our top row. And then the last one, you want to go 1 past your end. So our end is at 12. That's how many columns we have in total. So you want to put 13. Even though we don't have a 13th column, that just signifies the end. And make sure to put your semicolon. And when you save, you get this, which it's a little funky right now. Basically, what's happening is if I were to inspect this with Chrome DevTools, you can see that my first project is unable to take up the whole distance, the whole space, because it's still trying to fit the rest of these 3 into just 1 column each, right? These ones, they all take up where you want them to be, but just because these ones haven't been placed yet, it's a little funky. So we're going to do these ones now so that we actually see a cool kind of grid structure at the end. Okay, so we're going to do project 4 card. Now our project cards, the rest of them will be pretty nice and simple because they're basically what we have with project 1, 2, and 3, but we just update the rows, right? Because all of these so far we've said place in that top row, and now we have to say place it in the bottom row. So for grid area, our row start is actually going to be the end of our top row. So that's going to be 2. And then our column start and our column end are basically the same as our project 1. So we can do a 1 for our column start. Then for our row end, remember you go 1 past it. So we're going past row 2. So we go to 3. And then our column end is the same as our project 1 card, which is 5. Now let's place the 5th project. So project 5 card. This is going to have the same row start and end as our project 4. So that's going to be our 2 and our 3 here. And it's going to have the same column start and end as our project 2. So that's our 5 and our 9. So we can say 2 / 5 / 3 / 9. So this is saying start at row 2, end at row 3, start at column 5, end at column 5. And then our last one, so our project 6 card is going to be grid area. This is also column or row start 2. Column start's going to be 9. It's going to be the same as our project 3 card. And then our row end is 3. And then our column end is 13, just like our project 3. And if I save this, I actually get my projects all set up in their columns and their rows. We got to do our images. Let's just do that right now. So I'm going to go to the between my projects section ID and my project 1 card. So this is around line 73, 75. Now I want us to actually create a little bit of like a card type design for this. And we're going to change all of these different things. So we want to select all of these divs that are within our projects. They all do have a class of project card, but we're going to get practice with that descendant selector again. So we're going to target the parent element, which in this case is this one. So we can do our pound projects section. And then to select every single div element that's within that one, we do our closing caret, and then we do div. So this will select all of our project cards here. And I'm going to do my brackets. And let's create a new color variable. So if you go all the way up to the top to your root, we'll create a new one for card. So after my button variable line, I'm going to create one called card. And let's use the color 3ED, 3CD. So at the very top in that root where we defined our variables before, I created a new variable called card and I set it to a background color, or I set the color to 3ED, 3CD. Now, if I want to set the background color to all of these, you can do background hyphen color. So to access one of the variables that we defined before, we use VAR like we did down up here for our body background color or our text color. So back down here in where we've been working, we'll do VAR, and then in parentheses, we'll do hyphen, hyphen, and then we'll do the new one that we created, which is card. And we will do our semicolon, and then I want them to be a little bit of rounded. So I am going to do border radius, and I'll set that equal to 20 pixels to give a little bit of rounding to our cards. So if I save this, you'll notice I do actually get my cards where they're placed within our grid. They're rounded and they have that color that we just created. Now, after this rule, the other way that you could have targeted them all, which I just want to remind you for this is they all have a class of project card on it. So if you want to target all of those using the class, you just do the period and then project hyphen card, and this selects them all. Now, what I'm going to do here is show you a new unit that we haven't discussed yet. And basically, I want to set the height. So I want all of the actual pieces of content to only take up about like 70% of my screen because I want to see some stuff before or after it as I'm scrolling. To do 70% of the screen and making sure that it's adaptable to the to different people's devices, you would put 70, which stands for the 70%, and then you do VH, which stands for viewport height. And that's just basically the height of the top of this screen to the bottom of the screen. And so when I do that, you'll notice that it gets a little funky because it's trying to put all of our stuff in like a smaller section, and the image hasn't been resized yet. So we're going to do that now. So after this section, we're going to do all of the images within our project cards. So that's another descendant selector opportunity. So project card is the class, and then you do the closing caret, and then IMG for image. And that will target everything that has a class, a project card, go inside of it and find your image. So now we're going to set its width, and the width that we want, we're going to set it to 100%. Now, the reason that we're using 100% is this will be the width from the left to the right of the parent element. So in this case, the parent element of our image we can see is right here, which is our project card sections. And so when we save this, now our image will only take up 100% of the size of our project cards for the width. I'm going to also change the height to 65%. And so now this will take up about 65% of my my stuff right here. It'll probably look better on the fuller screen like so. And then the last thing I want to do for this is you'll notice that we have our border radius on our cards where we get these nice rounded corners on the actual background, but that's not happening with our image. That's because our image is being rendered on top of our background, but we can use that border radius property on our images as well. We can also specifically target certain corners. So I'm going to put border top left radius. Long property name. This is basically going to change how curved the border is, but only on the top left of our images. So I'm going to put this at 20 pixels, and that'll curve it just on the top left. And then I can do the same for the top right as well. And then now we get these nice cards. Looks a little bit better on the full screen for these kind of curved edges. So we're going to learn how to change the grid from this kind of structure to when we go down to like a mobile device that the grid itself changes and where these things are placed. To do that, we got to use what is called a media query. And this is a little bit of code that basically tells the browser to go and find some information about the actual device that a user is using. So we're going to do this at the kind of top of our project section. So up here, it's around line 68 for me. I'll create some space. And we're going to do the character, the @ symbol, and then we type in the word media, and then we can do a space. And then in parentheses, so we can start a parentheses, we're providing some sort of condition that we want the browser to check for, that we're going to put some code inside of it that says only apply this code if this thing is true. So we could do like a width. Typically, when you're looking at different screen sizes, you're more concerned about the width of the screen because the width of a phone is much different than the width of a laptop, than a tablet, and so on and so forth. And most content you can scroll. So height doesn't matter that much. So if we set width, let's say to like 1,000 pixels, and then we do a space at the end of this in our brackets, we can start inputting some code in here, and this will only apply if the user's device is 1,000 pixels wide. Now, this isn't super helpful because I don't know of a device that is exactly 1,000 pixels, and you probably won't know the devices of every user. So we're going to update and not use width, which is very specific, but instead we are going to use min width. So min hyphen width, and I'm going to change this to 1,051 pixels. What this does is it says, look at the user's device. If their device is 1,051 pixels or more, apply this code. And so what we're going to do here is I'm going to take everything from here of my, so I'm going to take this whole section. So my project section where I have display grid, and I'm going to indent and place it inside here. So now this will say, look at the user's device. If it's 1,051 pixels or more, we're going to set our project section to be a grid. And then we can take all of the placements of those cards and also place that in here. I'm just going to do a little bit of cleanup. So now this is saying, look at the user's device. It's 1,051 pixels or greater. Use the grid that we set up before. And so when I save, you'll notice that my screen right now is greater than 1,051 pixels. So I see the grid that we created. But as I go lower and lower and lower, there's at some point where it breaks. And that's probably that I've reached this threshold. My size of my window is less than this. A nice way to test this and also to see where things maybe start to get a little funky and where you want to create these breakpoints is if you open up the website in Chrome and you do inspect. You can set this button right here, and this allows you to change the size of your screen, and it'll tell you exactly how big it is up here. And so you'll notice as I'm above that 1050, which is up here, as I go down and down and down and down, once I reach 1050, because I did 1051, it breaks. But anytime I'm above that, it goes like that. So now, if I want to create a separate grid or separate layout for when it's like this, maybe I want there to be two side by side now and 3 rows. I just create another media query to ask for that. So at the end of all of this, so I have my media query going through all of this stuff in here. I'm going to create a new media query. So at media, I can provide the condition again. So I'm going to say minimum width. And this one I'm going to do 751 pixels. And I found these values by just going in here and playing around with this and seeing where things started to look good or bad or stuff like that. And I wanted to check for a different condition too. So I have at media, min width is 751 pixels or greater, but this would also apply up here, right? If there's something that was 1,400 pixels, both of these are true. So if I want to say and, I can check for the max width. So now what this is doing is creating a new media query that is going to look between 751 pixels wide and 1,050 pixels wide. And I can create a new grid in my brackets here that is going to apply for that. So to do that, I'm just going to be a little lazy and just copy everything from up here and change some of the settings. And so I can go in here and paste. So right now, this is the same grid as we did before. I just copied and pasted from before. But I'm going to set up where instead of it being 12 columns, let's do 2, and let's have them be over 3 rows. Now I can also update where my placements are. So for my project 1 card, I'm going to change this 5 to a 2. In project 2 card, I'm also going to change it to a 2, and I'm going to change the 9 to a 3. And these are, again, our row start, our column start, our row end, and our column end. For project 3, the values will be 2, 1, 3, and 2. So starting on row 2, column 1, end at row 3, and column 2. For project 4, we'll have 2, 2, 3, 3. For project 5, we'll have 3, 1, 4, and 2. And then for our project 6 card, we'll have 3, 2, 4, and 3. And now that we've updated that, whenever we have a screen that is in between 5 or 751 pixels and 1050 pixels, it'll apply our new grid instead. So here we're above our 1050, which was our initial grid. But then when we go down below 1051, it creates that new grid that we told it to. And it'll stick with this one until it gets to 750, which was our other breakpoint. So this one's going to just be like a little fun thing. So basically, we want for our images to start off in grayscale. So it's going to be black and white. And then when you hover over the image, it's going to become into a color. It's kind of like a highlight effect. So I'm going to go to my project section and I'll just go to the very top of it, line 68-ish or so. And I'm going to first start off by defining the before behavior. So to do that, I want to select all of my project images. So I can do period project image because all of these have a class of project image. And I'm going to apply what is called a filter. And these are basically just different effects that you can do. So you have blur, which will kind of blur something out a little bit. We have brightness, which you can change the brightness values or the contrast values. Drop shadow, if you want to add like a little shadow effect underneath an element to make it look like it's almost like floating a little bit or clickable. There's some opacity ones, there's saturate. All of these are kind of like more image effects that you can apply. In this case, we're going to apply grayscale, which this is going to change our images to be 100% in the kind of black and white. And you have to provide a value from 0 to 100. 0 is going to be that it's no grayscale effect applied. So it's just going to be your typical image, but 100% will make it fully black and white. And if I do my semicolon and I save, now all of my images are black and white as we start. After all of this, we want to define our after behavior. So I'm going to go to the end of this code block and enter twice to add a new one. Now, every element has what are called pseudo classes. So far we've been adding our classes with class equals and then putting a value in. But there's also some ones that kind of just happen by default when you do something on a website. And one of those is hovering. So if we were to put our class of project hyphen image, this targets all of our project images. But if we want to define something to happen only when we're hovering over one of them, we can do the colon and then the word hover. And this selector will say, grab all of our project images, and we're going to define a behavior that happens when you hover over them. In this case, we want it to be fully colored again. So we'll do the same property of filter, the same specific one of grayscale, but this time we'll say 0%, which basically will turn off that grayscale effect. And when we save, by default, it'll still be in our grayscale. But if I go over and I hover over one, it'll actually go back to being a fully colored image. Now, right now, it is super sharp. Like it's just you hover over and it's immediately colored. You hover off, it's immediately black and white again. If you want to make it look a little bit smoother, we'll do a transition. So to do a transition, you start in wherever your starting kind of section is. So in this case, it's going to be our just dot project image. We're going to add a new property and call it transition. And with transition, the first thing that you provide is the property that you actually want to make this transition over. So in this case, it is our filter because we want to filter from the grayscale 100% to the filter grayscale 0%. So we'll set transition to filter. And then when you do a space, you provide how long you want this transition to take. So I'm going to say 3 seconds. So 3S to make it like super obvious. I'll do a semicolon and we hover and I'll do it by default at first. But now as I hover over, it will start to become kind of colored in over a 3 second duration because that's what I said in my transition. And when I hover off, so I'm not hovering anymore, it goes back, transitioning in the reverse for 3 seconds. Yeah, pretty cool. And not actually that hard to do. It's only a couple lines of code.